Hello, this is Evan here from the Trade Risk on Wednesday, July 7th. We are intraday right now, and this is our weekly swing trade ideas video where we bring you stocks based on a variety of discretionary, technical, and quantitative criteria, all of which we're going to break down for you in just a moment. And as always, these videos are sponsored by our partners over at Investors Business Daily. All of the long ideas we are curating from their stock lists. You can get access to their stock lists with a link in the description of this video. So we've got 6 names we're going to look at today. We actually have more ideas sort of on the short side today than we do on the long side. That doesn't happen often, and that's just a product of the market environment that we're in and some of the scans that we're seeing out there for at least some short-term opportunities. So let's take a run through it here. I first want to touch on USO, so just a sort of discretionary sort of analysis take by me looking at USO here. You can see that we're finally getting some signs of cracking here for the first time in quite some time. If we look at the weekly chart of USO, I mean, this thing has been mega strong here over the past 12 months. And so far, it is just a small blip, a small crack, but notice we are below last week's low now on this weekly candle. Again, this weekly candle now is only 2 days in. We have to see how it closes out the week, but we're getting some signs of at least shifting of the demand up here at USO over 50. You can look at some of these shorter term. So we've got this level here, which I think is going to be an interesting level to see if we can close below or above this on a weekly basis. You know, you can look at more immediate sort of trend lines here that are starting to break in the short term. You can look at some of these longer term trend lines, which haven't quite broke just yet, but maybe you get an idea of maybe where USO could pull back to if it starts to retest and get back into some of this old sort of general guide back in here. So I'll let you sort of look at those trend lines yourself, but I think the key here is you've got heavier volume coming in. We're breaking some prior lows. We're breaking some short-term support, and this is something we want to pay attention to. We highlighted USO way back here on this candle back in March, remember, and we said, you know, it doesn't have to be a doomsday scenario where oil corrects 20, 30, 40%. It just could mean that oil needs to reset itself and go sideways, and I'm sort of kind of thinking the same thing here. It doesn't have to be the end of oil and this longer term trend. It just might mean a sort of a pause here and a breather for the rest of this month. So let's pay attention to it. We got some signs there, certainly in the short term, that is pulling back, stalling out a bit. And then we have the energy stocks themselves, which sort of led the move here in the sense of topping maybe a little bit earlier. So you know, the USO trend or the USO chart we just looked at has just been grinding higher here for the past 2 months. And when we look at energy stocks, they've essentially moved flat and sideways. So we had the top in here back in March again in XLE, and you can see we've basically been struggling to get back over where we topped out from in March around $54. We've held above it briefly, and we were above it for a couple of weeks, but then we came back down, tried to push above it recently, and now breaking back down again. So we're seeing some resistance or some hesitation up here in the mid 50s. And so for XLE, same kind of thing here. If USO starts or continues to crack down, I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade back down to, you know, the 46s in XLE, and maybe we carve out sort of this type of range here for the summertime as we, you know, maybe retest this area here from the April lows. So just some thoughts there on energy and that space generally, because we do have some actionable or some notable different movement here over the past couple of weeks. So let's move into some technical stock scans now. So these are our TC2000 scans. We're still running our 4th of July Independence Day sale. So we've got, I think, 24 hours left on that. So if you are interested in any of our scans, now is the time. Clock is ticking on that. So be sure to check out our store at thetraderisk.com. So let's take a look at the first scan here. First stock here is WNT. MS. This is coming from our pullback strength scan. So this is a bullish scan. It is looking for stocks that are exhibiting short-term, intermediate-term momentum to the upside, and they have recently pulled back. Very shallow sort of pullbacks here is what it's looking for, and then it's looking for that quick stabilization. So for WMS here, you can see we had this nice impulse leg up over the past 2 weeks or 2 weeks ago in the middle of June. So we had this nice run up from about $100 to $118. You had a nice little 3-day pullback shakeout. MACD stayed nice and strong up here, so momentum stayed strong. And then look at today's action. We are back up and taking out yesterday's highs, and we have this big breakout level here that we're going to keep an eye on. So this is our pullback strength scan. You can see it's getting ready, kind of a day one early entry move today if it closes strong, and then really above 117, 118, let's call it, is when it gets a lot more interesting for a true breakout. So that's our first idea. If we look at our second idea, this is BEN, ticker symbol BEN, Franklin Resources. This is hitting our engulfing, our bullish engulfing scan. So this is looking at the classic sort of candlestick pattern, the 2-bar candlestick pattern that looks for today's bar to engulf the prior day's bar. And what that basically means is open below the body of yesterday and rally above the top of the body from yesterday. So you can see here we traded the body here about a 20-cent range here in BEN. We opened below it today. We're rallying nice and strongly. What I also like about this setup here is you had this clear sort of pivot here from the end of June. So you essentially had a false breakdown. It's a little bit early to call it that. So this is sort of an early entry again. So again, make sure you're doing your homework and this is a comfortable setup for you. But we tried to break down below this pivot. We put a nice tail on yesterday, and now we put in a bullish engulfing bar today. So the textbook basically tells us now we're looking for a follow-through day tomorrow for confirmation that these lows are good. So BEN, that's our second idea there, coming from our engulfing bullish scan. Now let's switch gears to some bearish ideas. We've got 3 names we're looking at. The first is just the exact opposite. So this is our bearish engulfing scan. So we're looking for, again, that same 2-bar pattern where we open at this time above the body of yesterday's candle and we close and fall below the body of yesterday's candle. So MU, you can see here, is in the semiconductor space, and semiconductors generally here have been doing pretty well. Although remember last week, I think it was last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? Yes, it was last week. We talked about this. This was a trade idea on a false breakout up here. If this poked its head up and then started to fail, we need to be a little bit cautious. It's starting to look like that might be playing out. It's not, the jury's still out. We're waiting to see if this really does, ratchet lower here, but something to keep an eye on. And if that does happen, MU might be your ticket to the downside if you're looking to short on this trade, because you do have more of a weaker pattern here. We're well off of highs. You've got a bearish engulfing bar that's getting put on now. So you almost had like this little weak bear flag. It's breaking down now. So this is a weaker semiconductor play right now, and that's hitting our bearish engulfing scan. Next up is WB. So this one here I wanted to throw in, and it had some movement already. So this doesn't look exact. This is definitely an aggressive trade. This is a bearish trade. This is hitting our inverted hammer scan, and the inverted hammer is getting a little bit loose right now. So when I scanned for this earlier, we were trading, a little bit lower, below $59. So if we start to rally here, then this is not a pattern, not a scan that would still hold up. But I wanted to show it anyway, because at least it's a stock on the move right now. Yesterday's action, you could see, rejected everything above the 60s, closed on its lows. And then today we tried to rally over into the, above yesterday's highs into the mid 60s, and that's been rejected so far. And we're starting to close closer to the lows. So WB here definitely has some sellers up here in the upper 60s, but this does have this big explosive gap. It's got this big base. So this is very much a counter trend, sort of advanced pattern here. If you're going to fight this, if you're going to be on the short side of this, you just have to be more experienced and, usual sort of risk disclaimers apply here. So I'm not the biggest fan of shorting a momentum sort of pop like this, but let's play it out here. Let's see how it closes. If it closes weak and then you're looking for a trade to maybe fill this gap and you're very good with risk management and you know when to cut this loss if it goes against you, then this is something you could pay attention to. So WB, that's one there. And last but not least is NOMD. This is hitting our tight lows scan. So this is a bearish scan. So this is in the consumer defensive sector. So in the more boring sort of space, but basically here you've got this sell-off that started in the beginning of June and it got pretty deep here. It was 13% sell-off, which is deep for this type of name. Notice though, it broke sort of below this little May low here and then it's kind of flagging out very weak and it's got this very nice tight cluster of lows here. So if this starts to follow through below $28, then this could, continue to sort of cascade lower here. Does have some slight positive momentum divergence that's trying to brew. So you do have that sort of working against you, but certainly if this starts to break down, it looks, kind of weak here on a relative basis. So that's it. That's what I have for this week's trade ideas. A little more tilted to the short side out there. Doesn't mean there aren't long ideas that are still valid and showing up, but just showing that do see a handful of short-term technical weak patterns out there. So leave a comment below. Let me know what trade idea you liked the best or anything else have your eye this week. Leave a comment. Always love to know what everybody's up to and trading and thinking. And with that, thank you so much for tuning into our videos every Wednesday, trade ideas just like this. And don't forget, if you want any of these scans, 24 hours left on our site-wide sale up to 40% off. Thanks so much.